Hey lovelies, this is my Download 2025 review. I have got my laptop down here with some notes on, if you catch me looking down. It is the 28th of June, so it's taken me a couple of weeks to record this. I started a new job, I've had a bit of the download blues, so I haven't done much. I thought I'd just do a little review talking about the good, the bad, the in-between, and this year we did RIP, so we were in a classic bell tent. Also had accessible wristbands for the first time, so it was completely different to last year, thank God. So I thought I'd just talk you through it day by day and we'll kind of overall at the end. Okay, so just a disclaimer before I start. These are only my own opinions and I'm just going off based off my experience. If you don't agree, that's fine. And I think overall Download did a really good job with the weather. It was just crazy this year. And they definitely improved on some things from last year. So I thought it was a good idea to talk about those bits as well. So on Wednesday, we left at about 7 o'clock. Now, we were travelling from North Wales, so we got close to Download at about 10 o'clock. Traffic was nowhere near as bad as previous years because I heard that 2023, it was hours upon hours waiting to get into the car park, so luckily we didn't have that problem. We ended up getting off at the next junction, so I believe General Camping got off the motorway. And then the postcode for the RIP car park was actually taking us off the next junction. So we seemed to miss all of that traffic, which was quite useful. Parking wasn't too bad, so it was fairly easy. From the road, you kind of just turned left and the field of car park was there. Like I said, we got there about 10, half 10, and there was a steward to let us know where to park. We were in Metal Meadow 2. So we were across the road, so anytime we had to go to the village or the arena, we did have to cross the road, but it was constantly manned with staff and had a temporary speed reduction down to 40 because I think that is national speed limit, that road. There was also a footbridge that kind of went up and over, but with my stick, I wasn't doing all those steps. So as soon as we got in, obviously we had the bag searches, and then there was kind of, I would say it was a smaller hill than in Purple Camp, but it was a hill up to reception. So there was actually what they call a concierge service, basically a man in a van, but he was really useful. They packed all of our stuff up into the van and then we walked up the hill and they met us at the top. One thing I would say is that it wasn't very clear what that was. So there were a couple of people waiting around, and I did remember from all of the RIP documents that there was some kind of service that would take your bags up the hill, but it wasn't quite clear and there was no signage. So I think a lot of people missed that because the van wasn't there when we arrived. It must have been at the top dropping people's stuff off. So people just started walking up the hill with their stuff. And I think a lot of people missed that. So that was really helpful in terms of an accessibility perspective, because even though the walk was a lot shorter than to Camping Plus, we still had a lot of stuff, and so that was really helpful. One thing I will say is that we didn't take the trolley this year, but we probably should have. So we presumed that the tent would be close to the car park and the tent would be close to reception. Now, it wasn't necessarily. I think we were 918, so we were quite far back in the field. Now, you could have been a lot further, but it's just something we didn't think about and that might be worth doing. Okay, so when we got up to reception, the queue was really quite short and they were quite well organised. So they already had Neil's Essential Companion wristband, which was really useful because I was slightly worried where we were going to get it from. So this year was the first year I had accessibility. I had done the application for it, and so I knew I was going to have loads of wristbands, but I didn't quite know where to get them from. I wanted to make sure we got them on the Wednesday in the morning, early afternoon, just because I didn't want to say try and go into the arena on the Friday and we didn't have the correct stuff. Like, that would really throw me off. So I'm happy they had the wristband, and they did tell us that to get the rest of them we were to go to the accessible hub in the village, so we went there later on in the day. Tent, it was really lovely. We had a classic bell tent and it was waterproof. There were like little vents you could open, which was really good for during the day because it kind of cooled the inside down, and then by the time we went back in the evening we could close them for the night. The bed did go down slightly, however it wasn't a problem as to we had to go to reception about it. I did inquire and they did have like, I don't know whether you'd call it a maintenance service, but it was somebody from the company going around and kind of pumping up the beds if they needed it. So there was that option, but ours wasn't too bad. Overall, I think the camp was quite secure. So again, I said we were in Meadow 2. There was always security around checking your wristbands on entry and exit, and so I thought it was quite secure. On the Wednesday, Thursday, I did see a couple of security kind of patrols around the camp itself, but I would say that on the Friday, Saturday, Sunday I didn't see that. So I'm not sure why that is, but it wasn't a problem. I think RIP's whole appeal is rock by day, rest by night, and I do think that that was kind of followed. So they kind of have a curfew after 1 a.m. It's meant to be like quiet. I mean, we had no problems with that. Camping Plus the year before, we had some problems with some neighbours. Go to sleep fairly early, so I mean, we didn't have any problem. So when we did go into the village, the access hub was really useful. They had all the extra wristbands, everything noted down, and told us how and when to use them. We had ground viewing platform, and then accessible queues and toilets, which was really helpful, and I will come on to in a little bit. The quick queues were amazing, so we used it mainly for the merch store and the co-op. Now, last year we didn't actually go into the merch store because of the queue. I wouldn't be able to stand for that long, and it was really useful being able to. So what you really do essentially is you go in the exit and they check your wristband. Merch in general, the Mary White collection was really nice this year. We had a lot we were looking at, but the prices were quite high. Hoodies, some of them were about 70 each, so quite steep. There was a good variety of merch. There was something for every budget, I think. Because we were in RIP, we had access to the courtyard stage. Now, that was really nice. It was kind of less crowded, so we could relax there in the evenings, mainly Wednesday, Thursday. Something I would say is it needed more seats. Now, I don't quite know where you'd put the seats, but it did need some more because people were sitting on the side of the planters, like with all the plants and bushes growing out of them. There were a couple of tables and chairs, but mainly I'd say people arrived early and then sat there all evening. One thing that really was quite frustrating at the courtyard stage was the perpetual technical issues. Now, before pretty much every single set, they did about a 20-minute sound check due to these problems. It really delayed things, and then I think sets were either cut short or they were pushed back. That was slightly frustrating, and I do think the people performing on the stage were annoyed by that too. There is a convenience store in RIP, like this little guy, and he's got his own little shop. The prices were high. I would say they were kind of on par with the co-op, but some things were a little bit more expensive. So if you couldn't necessarily find it in the co-op, he had it, but at a higher price. In camp, you obviously get the upgraded toilets and showers. They were pretty clean and they were always well stocked. They had toilet roll, they had soap. Showers were slightly different this year, and they kind of were a bit claustrophobic. Now, last year we were in Camping Plus, so we had upgraded showers. They had pretty much a vent in the roof, I think. So try and imagine this. It's almost like a portaloo, but with a shower in it. Now, the ones from Camping Plus had like a hole in the top, so it was a vent and a light source. Now, the ones this year did not. So there were like some tiny little holes in the back of it, but almost it reminded me of, you know, when you go to Pets at Home and you buy a hamster and they have like those little holes in the box? That's what it was like. Now, it was extremely dark in there, and I kind of felt like I couldn't breathe because there was no light source, there was no kind of ventilation, and that did weird me out a little bit. And I think Neil couldn't particularly bring himself to use them because of that reason. They were just a bit different, and I don't think we expected them to be different, and it was kind of a little bit strange. But it was nice every once in a while to have a shower. You couldn't change the temperature, so they were very hot, and obviously it was a hot day, so the last thing you wanted was a hot shower. But, you know, I used them a couple of times, washed my hair. That was fairly nice. Thursday, Choir Noir was so good. We used the Access platform and the staff were really helpful. I would say the platform was positioned well, we had a good view, and it was really useful because I think for things like that, last year we missed out on a lot of the village things because we weren't particularly bothered enough to stand in a crowd for all that time, and it was quite nice to participate and be there, but to be able to sit down and have a little bit of space, that was quite nice. Thursday evening we had access to the guest area, I think at about 4 o'clock. So for Rip, the guest area was absolutely miles away. Absolutely miles. There was limited signage on where to go and where to walk. I remember at one point we were kind of following the crowd a little bit, walked across the road, and they were like, no, you can't come this way. You've got to go all the way back, all the way up the hill, and then round. It just never ended. And I think the thing is sometimes on the map, looks can be slightly deceiving. Even though it looks like it's really close, it's not. So be prepared. We didn't have a drink on the go. Just be prepared for it. When we got there was no accessible queue. There wasn't like a separate queue for access. Now luckily we went early. We kind of went as soon as it opened because obviously we have never been to the guest area. We were quite interested, so it wasn't necessarily a problem for me. It's just something I noticed. So the guest area had its own food, coffee, vendors, and some shaded seats. So it did have a shaded kind of bar. I wouldn't call it a pub. I'd say it was a bar with a shaded area and seats in it. Obviously it got extremely busy. For the size it was very busy. I would say that more seats and shade were needed. Now, I know there were quite a few benches and quite a lot of kind of cushions on the floor with shade over it. The thing I thought to myself is, what else are people going to be doing in the guest area? Why does there need to be so much grass room? Because a lot of people were kind of standing around. A lot of people were standing around waiting for a seat. It was just so hot, and sometimes you wanted to go in the guest area to see if you could get a seat in the shade and have a bit of a chillax when you were coming from the arena. So I would say that there could have been more seats. Obviously it was dry, so people were just sitting on the grass. It wasn't necessarily a problem for other people, but I think we were trying to look for shade and it was quite limited. Food options in Guest were good. They were slightly more pricey, so they had their like ostrich and wagyu burgers, which we knew would be expensive, but you know, wow. Coffee. Now, when you're doing 20,000 steps a day, you need coffee. All the coffee was absolute shit. The amount of times I bought an iced latte, was so excited for it, and then it was absolutely rubbish, was unreal. I think I probably wasted about 40 quid on coffee. It was all labelled as kind of barista, professional coffee. That was really something we were looking forward to. Both on the RIP package and the kind of Beyond the Bands at Download, they had boasted about this barista, professional coffee. We were super excited. It was all really bad and quite expensively priced. I think each time I probably paid between £5 and £6.50 for a coffee. Obviously, it's quite a small coffee and it's not very nice. Custard and crumble and the mac and cheese really stood out. They were both in the village. We had them several times. The mac and cheese was just so filling. It was kind of... It looked like there wasn't a lot of food. The pot was kind of that big, but oh my god, I was full every time. Way too full, even. Custard and crumble were really nice. They did a modified version for me and I really enjoyed that. It was quite nice to have something a bit different. I mean, I do like having a kind of dessert at the end of each day at Download. Usually I just get churros, so that was something a little bit different. Friday was the arena day, so we were super excited about this. The accessible entrance was really helpful. It was quick moving. There were still searches, but I would say that the staff were really well trained on knowing what was allowed for access customers. So if you don't know, accessible customers are allowed slightly different things than normal customers. They're allowed to bring in a little bit more food and drink, but obviously also a lot of people have mobility aids, wheelchairs, walking sticks, etc. And I would say the staff were really zoned in. They knew what you couldn't have, and they just did it with ease. It kind of moved through really quickly and they were really helpful. I would say the food in the arena was better than last year. I would say there was a good variety. Food vendors were kind of clustered together. So for example, if you're at main stage, to the front left of it, it seemed like all of the chicken and chips places were all next to each other, which was really strange. So I think when I have seen a lot of people saying that the variety was crap, but I do think that's probably because they kind of seemed clustered together. So all the chicken and chips places were in that one corner. Then there was all loaded fries places next to each other. There wasn't a meal we had that we didn't enjoy. Some were more filling than others, so some were kind of better value for money. Prices were high, but as expected. Bunnymans, Neil ate Bunnymans twice. It was his favourite last year, it was his favourite this year. It had huge queues, which was really nice to see. I would say that it definitely is worth it. I don't particularly like it, but the amount of food you get for how much you pay, it really is worth it. Water. Water was difficult this year. I do think it was because of the weather. Everybody needed water. And obviously there weren't particularly many water points. From my memory, there was 3 or 4 water points throughout the whole arena. Now, if you think about it, the amount of people that are going, you are going to have big queues, and I do understand that. I do think that we spent a lot of money in the first few days buying cans of water because we just couldn't queue up. We ended up, in the end, buying the Download kind of Stanley Cup, and we refilled that a couple of times a day so we weren't queuing as often. I think one thing potentially that could happen that would be useful is that if they had staff at the water points and then a separate accessible queue, because I do think there were a lot of disabled people struggling to queue up. This year there were sensory places and they were really, really useful. So I didn't actually use this until I think it was the Friday. They did have one in the village, but I didn't use that one. I used the one in the arena. It was really useful. The staff were really kind and they were really well trained actually. They had quite good equipment, so they kind of had like a blackout room, a dark space that had some kind of lights and you know, comfortable seats in there, so that was really nice. They kind of had ear defenders, they had fidgets, and fans in there. So despite you thinking that it's going to be absolutely boiling under in a dark room in 30-degree weather, it was really cool, which was quite nice. No requirements to use those sensory spaces. They are for everyone and anyone. You don't have to be an Access customer. So I would definitely say if you're feeling overwhelmed, it's a really good place to go. It was kind of a no questions asked thing. We were quite, I was quite nervous to approach, but they kind of saw you standing there and they just kind of said, would you like to sit down? You can go in the dark room. So Weezer, I think this was one of Neil's highlights for the weekend. The crowd was really good, the set list was good, and they were a lot of fun. Had no sound issues. I know some bands on the main stage that we saw did have what seemed to be like sound issues, but they had no problems. Green Day put on a really good show, obviously the headliner on the Friday. They had loads of kind of well-known songs and they did them all. I think they ended up doing something like 22 songs, which is quite impressive. They were kind of going, just going for it. It did rain a little bit. Now, if you were there, you know this kind of cathartic moment. During Wake Me Up When September Ends, during the end of the song, it just started to rain. It was really strange because it had been so hot all day. Now the rain was actually quite welcomed because we were just too hot. I think at the time I was getting a pizza. We were going to kind of head back to camp. But it was really nice. The rain was nice, the song was nice. It was kind of a moment. The crowd really enjoyed it, and I think despite me not being too fussed when the lineup was announced, I think they put on a really good show. Saturday, Loathe was so good. This was our first band of the day. They were really energetic and it was worth getting up early for. The arena was fairly empty. I think this was it was either 11 or midday. Vocals were great, and it's definitely a band we will be listening to going forward. We watched a few other bands. We watched Bleed From Within, we watched Hatebreed. Poppy was really good. She had a really good set list, and there was this really cute little girl in front of us that was just going absolutely mad. This day was so hot. Saturday we really struggled. Now I was literally wearing shorts and a bikini top and I was sweating. We were feeling really lethargic no matter how much we ate, no matter how much we drank. I just felt like a sloth. It was so hot. I had my little fan. It was crazy. We had a lot of slushies, we had a lot of ice cream, we had a lot of water. And we did end up missing some bands because it was just, we were really struggling with the heat. I would definitely say that some of the Access platforms would have benefited from extra shade. So to me, there are metal rods holding up the Access platform. So could you not put some kind of fabric attaching to the two poles like they did in the Village? I don't know, but it works in my head, so who knows. So Sleep Token, probably one of the most controversial headliners of recent years. I, pre-download, was not particularly a fan. I think the sound was really good for their set. I think the production was good. They didn't seem to connect much with the audience. Now that was just my personal opinion. I do think that maybe that's a bit of their vibe because obviously they've got masks on, they're quite emotional and long songs. It just, I think I have seen quite a few people mention this. I don't know that it's just me, but it did just seem like one song after another. There wasn't particularly much interaction, which is not what you expect. That's just my personal opinion. I'm not a personal fan, so, we did watch, I'd say we watched 3/4 of their set. One completely random note is that the sinks with mirrors were really welcome. I felt like you could wash your hands properly and feel really clean. They were well stocked with soap, which was surprising because in the Village, the porta toilets can get crazy, but there was a lot of soap. It kind of felt a bit more hygienic, like a bathroom experience. It wasn't just like a Portaloo and that was it. Sunday was literally my favourite day. I think it was probably Neil's favourite as well. The sourdough pizza near the guest area, I had it twice. It was really amazing. It was kind of quick service, freshly made, oven baked. It was just really good. The first bands of the day, we went to see Vower. I was in the access seating, Neil was in the crash at the front. Vocals were really good, they were quite engaging with the audience. This is something that he was really excited to see, and I do think it met his expectations, so that was nice. It was a good start. Next we saw Ginger. They were amazing. We did end up seeing President. If you have seen on social media, President has been one of the most kind of hyped new coming bands, and they really did exceed our expectations. Now, we made a little bit of a tactical move, and about an hour before President started, we went into the Dogtooth. We were in the accessible viewing platform, so we did put our seats down, and we actually kind of accidentally ended up seeing a really cool band. They're called 7 Hours After Violet. Now, we did not plan to see this band. It was the craziest thing I've ever seen. It was amazing, and it just shows you that sometimes even if you don't know what you're going to see, you'll end up really enjoying it. So that was, really great. We then saw President again. It was a bit of a small stage, but I'm not sure where else they would have put it, and I'm 100% sure it's Charlie. I am a long-standing Fightstar fan, and if it's not Charlie, then I don't know what I'm doing with my life. One thing that really annoyed me was the secret set was on at the same time as President. Now, the secret set was Malevolence. I have not been a long-time Malevolence fan, but we kind of thought it might be Malevolence. I know there was a little bit of a leak beforehand. We were super excited. I really wanted to see them, but I also really wanted to see President. Now, I think I'm not quite sure why I downloaded this, because President was obviously such a hyped band, so many people wanted to see it, and so they then missed out on seeing the secret set. I think it maybe would have benefited from being at a different time, but I do know sometimes that timings can be difficult, and it might have been one of those things where it is what it is, but I would have liked to have seen them. Spirit Box, what the fuck was up with the sound? Now, I don't know if this is just me, but Courtney's vocals just seemed really low. Now, I don't know whether she needed to be turned up. I don't know whether it was, her vocals and the mic. It just seemed off. I know the Opus stage had some problems this year and last year with sound. The main stage is normally fine, but this kind of just baffled me. Let me know if you felt the same, because we weren't sure if it was us. My Valentine was absolutely amazing. They really deserved the support. The crowd loved it and joined in. Those are some of the best moments from the Sunday. It was just great. I mean, we have never seen Bullet live before. They did the whole of the Poison album, and I believe it was the last time they were doing it, so they were just running through the album, and so that was really exciting. There are obviously a lot of good songs on there, and I think it was a perfect lineup before Korn. Korn. This is my favourite of the weekend. I really think they deserve the headlining spot and they should have done it a long time ago. They put on such a good show, the lights, it was just amazing. We didn't know what to expect, so we knew that Jonathan was having some health problems, so we were a little bit worried, but actually, considering that, his vocals were amazing. You could really tell he put his all into it and had been waiting for this for a long time. Set list was great. I liked Blind at the start and then Freak on a Leash last. I think that was a really good use of kind of set list planning. Loved the bagpipes, so we weren't sure whether they would play Chutes and Ladders, but they did. It was a really great end to the weekend, although a bit sad. Security hurried people out so quickly. I don't know whether it was, Korn ran over. We were just rushed out and I felt like I needed a minute. They were not having any of it. I know, probably they need to get people out and clean up and shut down and, probably got their own time frame, but it just seemed like it was quicker than previous years. And then on the Monday, the car park, we left at about 10 o'clock. It was pretty much empty by then. The traffic was really light and it was really easy to get out, so we had no problems getting home and it didn't take us too long to do that at all. Okay, so Download 2025 overall. Now, I would say that it was my favourite year. Just a weather and a combination of the bands, it really worked, although at times the weather was a bit unruly. I managed to escape this sunburn because I was just religiously putting sun cream on. Neil didn't, he did get sunburnt. I think a couple of things that were a bit random. The arena times changed at some point, so we had made schedules because we didn't want to miss as much as we did last year. But then I believe it was the Friday or the Saturday, all the time, a lot of the timings changed for the main stage. That threw us off. We did miss a few bands we wanted to see because of the heat. It was just too hot. But I think you live and you learn, and maybe next year we'll put more breaks in the schedule and be a little bit more realistic. I would say that overall RIP was worth the money. However, I wouldn't say that we could afford to do it every year. So Ticketmaster's whole dynamic pricing thing, I didn't buy them early bird. I think I bought them around October, November. Now, by the time I bought them, they were $1,000 per person. Now, if you can imagine, that's a huge amount of money, considering you also need spending money, travel money, camping equipment, etc. I would say that if we were to do it again, I would probably buy it on early bird, or we were going to try Park Farm. I think the accessible team and wristbands were really useful. If you're thinking about it, if you need it, go for it because it really helped. Even if you don't use it all the time, it's there just in case you need it. And we haven't yet booked next year. I'm sure that we'll be looking to, but we're just not sure what option to do. Hopefully you enjoyed this video. Let me know in the comments what your favourite band was, what the worst thing was. Yeah. Bye bye.